All right, let's dive right in. There's this question that every single successful company eventually has to face. Once you've figured out how to survive, what's next? Do you have the guts to build something that actually lasts? Because that, right there, is the difference between being a footnote in history and becoming a legend.
And this quote, man, it just nails it. Think about YouTube back in, say, 2005. They were just burning through cash like crazy on server costs. The sensible thing to do would have been to cut back, right? But no, they doubled down. They knew that winning wasn't about hoarding what you have. It was about making sure you had enough firepower for when your moment finally arrived. And that's really the heart of this whole thing, getting out of that survival mode.
Okay, but here's the thing. This is exactly where the trap is set. For so many companies, the very thing that made them a huge success, well, it ends up becoming their cage. It's this crazy paradox, and it has taken down some of the biggest names you can think of.
So what's at the heart of this trap? It really boils down to this one core conflict. On one hand, you've got efficiency, doing the same thing just a little bit better. And on the other hand, you've got relevance, which is all about figuring out the next right thing to do. And this battle, right here, this is what decides if a company thrives or just dies.
I mean, just look at BlackBerry. Back in 2007, they were the kings. They had like half the entire smartphone market. But then, the iPhone shows up, and what does BlackBerry do? They focus on efficiency. They made their keywords a little better, their email a little faster. They literally perfected the best possible product for a world that was vanishing right before their eyes. They completely missed that the game wasn't about email machines anymore. It was about having a computer in your pocket.
But if you want the ultimate cautionary tale, it's got to be Kodak. I mean, this is unbelievable. They invented the digital camera. They held the future in their hands way back in 1975. But the leadership, they just couldn't bring themselves to let go of their cash cow, that profitable film business. So they chose to protect the past. And the final tragic irony? They actually blamed their own engineers for not being innovative enough right before the whole thing came crashing down into bankruptcy.
So, the big question is, how do you escape this trap? Well, what's so fascinating is that the answer, the future, is usually already there. It's hiding in plain sight inside the company. A lot of the time, it's disguised as some little side project, or, even better, as a huge internal cost.
I mean, really think about this for a second. What if your company's biggest expense was actually its greatest untapped asset? Back in the early 2000s, Amazon was just pouring insane amounts of money into building out this massive computing infrastructure. Why? Just to handle the Christmas shopping rush. To pretty much everyone, that was just, the cost of doing business. But Jeff Bezos, he saw something totally different. He had this realization that, hey, we're actually better at running all this complex server stuff than most companies are at their own main business. You can imagine his retail executives were horrified. They were like, wait, what? We're a store. We sell stuff. We're not a tech company. But Bezos just pushed right through it all and turned that massive internal cost into what we now know as Amazon Web Services, the business that basically powers the entire modern internet.
And this isn't just about physical or technical assets. A lot of the time, it's about your identity, the story you tell yourselves. Perfect example, Slack. Before it was Slack, it was a failing video game company. Yeah, really. They were called Tiny Speck. And the story they told themselves was, we're creative artists. We build these immersive worlds. They had actually built this amazing internal chat tool just to help them work together, but to them, it was just a tool. It wasn't the main event. The idea of selling that? That would have been selling out.
But then their game totally flopped, and they were at a crossroads. Do we stick with the old story, or do we write a new one? So they reframed their entire identity around that little internal tool, and it changed everything. Think about it. It was the exact same team with the exact same skills, but they unlocked this incredible, explosive growth, all because they changed the story of who they were and what they were really building. And that really brings us to the climax of this whole journey, right? It's that moment of truth, the point where a leader has to find the raw courage to let go of the very thing that made them successful in the first place. And a lot of times, the key is to see your own company like an outsider would. Back in the 80s, Intel was memory chips. That was their whole identity. But then Japanese competitors just flooded the market, and Intel was dying. The CEO, Andy Grove, he was completely stuck. Until one of his top guys asked him this brutally simple question. And suddenly, the answer was just obvious. That one question gave him the clarity he needed to abandon Intel's core identity and bet the entire company on a little side project they had going: microprocessors.
You see the same thing with Reed Hastings at Netflix. I mean, he had absolutely perfected the DVD by mail business. He crushed Blockbuster, but he knew that his own success was a trap. So he made this crazy choice to actively destroy his own profitable business, and he bet everything on streaming. And oh boy, Wall Street punished him for it. The stock completely tanked. But Hastings understood this one critical truth. It's way better to cannibalize your own company than to wait around for a competitor to do it for you.
So what actually happens when you take that terrifying leap? Well, you don't just survive. You end up building the entire infrastructure for what comes next. So what was the payoff for Amazon? Remember that little distraction? The one all the executives thought was a total waste of time? Well, get this. Today, AWS generates more operating income than the entire global retail business it was originally built to support. That little side project became the main profit engine for the whole company. It's just insane.
And what about YouTube? Well, their huge bet on having enough firepower to win, it paid off spectacularly. Just 2 years after risking it all on those servers, Google swooped in and bought them for over $1.5 billion. They didn't just survive. They built the platform that would define online video for everyone.
So when you look at all of these stories together, what's the common thread here? What's the one thing that separates the companies that just survive from the ones that become true visionaries? It all comes down to a fundamental shift in mindset.
So these are the principles we've just seen play out, right? You've got Amazon turning a massive cost into an even more massive asset. You've got Slack completely changing their future just by changing their story. And then you have the incredible courage of companies like Intel and Netflix letting go of the one thing that was working. What did they all have in common? They all chose to build for tomorrow, not just for today.
And all of this, it really builds to the ultimate example of this beyond mindset. When Jeff Bezos was in his garage packing books, what did everyone else see? They saw a bookstore. An online bookstore, sure, but a bookstore. But Bezos? He was playing a completely different game. He knew that books were just the first step. They were the perfect product to let him build the real thing, the entire infrastructure for all of digital commerce. See, he was never, ever just building a bookstore.
And that really leaves us with one final crucial question for you to think about. What are you really building? Are you just perfecting the keyboard for a world that's already disappearing? Or are you building the deep infrastructure for whatever comes next? Because the answer to that question, it doesn't just determine whether you survive. It determines your entire legacy.